Cast yourself back to the year 2000, when mankind stood at the dawn of a new millennium, a time when accessing the internet required a dial-up landline telephone connection. Bill Clinton was the president of the USA, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center stood tall and proud, and superhero films were considered an embarrassing and unprofitable niche, with rare successes too few and far between to be taken seriously. But during that summer, something changed. A film was released starring everyone's favorite bald starship captain in his first big non-Star Trek role amongst a cast of mostly unknowns. A film that would prove that advancements in CGI had finally progressed to the point where it was now possible to do justice to the imaginative and fantastic stories previously only enjoyed by comic book nerds and kids watching Saturday morning cartoons. The success of X-Men paved the way for a re-emergence of the superhero genre, and audiences have been treated to countless big-budgeted superhero films ever since, which have taken over the world with their popularity, to the point where all other genres have swayed and buckled in their presence, as their budgets balloon to increasingly crazy amounts, never seen during the previous millennium, with studios discovering they were seemingly a license to print money. But it couldn't last, and after more than 2 decades of superhero mania, fatigue began to set in, with things reaching their peak in 2019 with Avengers Endgame, that's seen a steady decline ever since. And we now find ourselves 23 years on from that cinematic turning point to a time in which superhero films can no longer be guaranteed to break even, let alone turn a profit. The perfect time, then, to launch a brand new one about a superhero no one's ever heard of. Enter the Blue Beetle, a film that would have been revolutionary had it come out 20 years ago, which would have made a big splash if it had come out 10 years ago, and would have at the very least likely made a profit just 4 years ago. But in the year 2023, it appears the boat for lesser-known superhero films has well and truly sailed, as we witness the Blue Beetle launching himself off an empty dock and scrambling to stay afloat as he drowns in the freezing cold sea. Which is a shame, really, because Blue Beetle is not a bad film and has many unique and interesting things going for it, not seen in other superhero films, with attempts to tackle big social problems, such as the inequality between rich and poor, faceless mega companies ever expanding and taking over their surroundings, greedy, soulless rich people with an insatiable lust to ever own more, poor workers being exploited and forced to participate in an unfair system where they're degraded and subjected to racism, whilst the strongest and most effective aspect of Blue Beetle lies in its depiction of a poor Mexican family. But what actually happens, I hear you ask? Well, pass me that magnifying glass, and let's get down on the ground and examine whether the ball the Blue Beetle's been rolling is made of chocolate, or whether it's made of pure shit. So the film begins at an Indiana Jones-style dig site within a frozen tundra, where we're introduced to Victoria Cord, an unempathic, wealthy bitch of a CEO who owns Cord Industries, a mega technology and research corporation, who arrives in her helicopter for a status report, and we see a giant stone orb has been dug out of the ground and is being lasered open. We then cut to the opening credits, where we see a montage of a Blue Beetle flying through space, implying the MacGuffin in this film is some kind of advanced alien technology, as we see images of hieroglyphs showing it being used in ancient Mayan culture, and that Cord Industries have been searching for it in order to explore exploited for military and financial gain. We're then introduced to Jaime, a 22-year-old Mexican graduate who's just returned home after getting his pre-law degree at the airport of Palmyra City, a fictional U.S. city that feels like it's straight out of Grand Theft Auto. Jaime puts on his mortarboard and asks a Tinder-swiping George R.R. Martin lookalike how he looks. Like you're 6 figures in debt, he sarcastically replies. Jaime's entire family of 3 generations are waiting there to welcome him home, and they take him out to lunch at a restaurant before breaking the bad news to him. Their landlord has tripled their rent. They're going to lose their home. Their garage repair business has gone bust, and his father has recently suffered a heart attack. But apart from that, everything's hunky-dory. When they go back to their house, we witness their dire situation, as their neighborhood is right on the edge of the huge and industrious city, and sat in the shadows of the cord skyscrapers, as the wealthy owners are clearly expanding, pushing up the rents and forcing them to move. Jaime vows to abandon his postgraduate plans and use his degree to get a well-paying job to save the family home. This time next year, we'll be millionaires, Jaime says while drinking a can of beer. We then cut to Jaime proudly standing in front of a mansion, wearing what at first glance appears to be designer clothing, before he's pulled out of his daydream by his sister, and we realize he's only wearing the uniform of a cleaner. The mansion belongs to Vicky Cord, and inside we meet Vicky's niece, Jenny Cord, who also owns shares in the Cord Company. Jenny confronts Vicky about her plans to develop OMAC, One-Man Army Corps, a RoboCop-style private police force that's made possible using the blue Beetle technology she's been excavating. Jenny says the company shouldn't be used to develop weapons, but Vicky tells her it's none of her business, and they get into a heated argument. The inciting incident of the film then takes place when Jaime's sister desires to take a dump and opts to use the bathroom in the mansion instead of the workers' outdoor portaloo. While acting as her lookout, Jaime witnesses the altercation between Vicky and Jenny and jumps in to defend Jenny. Vicky fires Jaime and his sister, but outside, Jenny thanks him for standing up for her and promises she will get him a job somewhere else in the company. The next day, Jaime puts on his smartest suit and tie and goes to the Cord Industries skyscraper, naively believing he'll be able to meet Jenny and take her up on her job offer. But the rude and racist receptionist tells him to wait indefinitely in the reception area. Meanwhile, Jenny sneaks into a laboratory within the same building and discovers the blue Beetle scarab Vicky's been excavating. She puts it into an empty Big Mac box and attempts to sneak out of the building when Jaime notices her and chases after her, desperately pleading for the job offer. Alarms suddenly go off and Jenny panics and gives Jaime the Big Mac box and tells him to guard it with his life, but not to open it. Back at home, Jaime's family peer pressure him to open it, and inside they discover the scarab, which activates when Jaime touches it, and it launches onto his face, like an alien face hugger. His clothes are then burnt away, and black matter comes out of his pores and covers his entire skin, mouth, eyes and face, which transforms him into a machine hybrid resembling a man wearing a Beetle-themed Iron Man suit. Jaime is then launched through the roof and into space, before being flown around the city as he hears an AI voice in his head that seems to be testing its functionality. But despite his cries of protest, Jaime has absolutely no control, and he's taken on a whirlwind adventure before being dropped back home again and passes out from exhaustion. Jaime has unwittingly become one with the blue Beetle, it seems, and must now work out what's going on by seeking Jenny's help, with the support of his family, while Vicky and Cord Industries try to track him down to steal back the scarab and create their army of evil robots. Now it's at this point during Act 2, where the more interesting social elements take a backseat to fairly bog-standard superhero fare, as we witness our unwilling young protagonist pulled into the machinations of a big evil company, where he's forced to learn to use his newfound superpowers to save the day, protect his family, and stop the bad guys. The rest of the film isn't terrible per se, but the superhero stuff feels very familiar, with many scenes feeling like a copy and paste from other superhero films, especially Iron Man, as Vicky's henchman literally wears an Iron Man suit for all of the action scenes, resulting in scenes that are far too reminiscent to the adventures of Tony Stark. The actor who plays Jaime, Xolo Maridueña, does a fantastic job at portraying the well-meaning but down-on-his-luck underdog who just wants to save his family. And you really believe in his performance, as he demonstrates a wide range of emotions, from undergoing his grisly transformation to his blood-curdling screams of pain when he's later tied up and tortured, to a very emotional sequence involving his father. I can't say a bad word against the chap, and I'm sure he's got a promising career ahead of him. I also appreciated that his character maintains a degree of realism, being involuntarily pulled into a world he knows nothing about, without becoming a Mary Sue and saving the world by the end, as he only learns to master his abilities by the third act. It could be argued that Jaime was too passive a character, as he wasn't in control of his powers for most of the action, while the Scarab did everything for him, but I actually thought this made the story more believable, unlike other superhero films, where the hero masters his newfound abilities 20 minutes after getting them. But the strongest aspect by far is the family dynamic. Unlike other superhero films, where the protagonist has to hide his powers from his family, Jaime's entire family, including his uncle and grandmother, witness his transformation and come along for the adventure, which was a fun twist I can't remember seeing before in another superhero film. It reminded me of a Roald Dahl story, specifically Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, with the extended family living in poverty together in a small, dilapidated house, while the intelligent and promising young man of the family, being the only one with any possible potential to save them from poverty, is plucked out of his poor world and into a crazy rich person's, right down to the holes being blown through the roof of his house, like Wonka's great glass elevator, and the entire family being taken along for the adventure. And just like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the main theme of the story is our families make us stronger, as whilst Jaime may be poor and living in a small overcrowded house with his entire family, they all love and emotionally support each other, whilst the rich characters are depicted as being depressed and isolated by their material wealth. The family are all brilliantly played too, especially the uncle, who was a lot of fun as the paranoid, crazy conspiracy theorist who becomes a sort of Mexican Alfred, handling the tech and gadgets. The actress playing Jenny did a decent job too, but I didn't quite believe in her and Jaime's romance, which felt too much like Aladdin, with her as the rich, lonely princess falling in love with the poorer younger man. But would she really want to kiss a man whose body has been infected with alien technology? Susan Sarandon was okay, I suppose, but she didn't have a lot to work with, as her character was severely underwritten, merely being a mad evil old bitch like Cruella de Vil. And her henchman too was extremely generic, with zero character, except right at the very end, where we learn more about his background, which actually turned out to be a very moving and emotional scene, but it arrived far too late in the story for us to care. So is Blue Beetle worth parting with your hard-earned cash to go and see? Maybe. As I said, it's not a bad film, but it's let down by abandoning its more serious subject matter to play things safe, ultimately resembling just another by-the-number superhero film by its conclusion, when it could have followed through with its attempt to tackle the serious social issues to the very end, as the third act, which should have taken place in the poor neighborhood, with all the residents fighting back against the cord company, which instead takes place on a small isolated island, with many silly and overly comedic moments involving the family. It's a shame, really, because it had the potential to be groundbreaking, and it made me wish I could go back to the last millennium and watch the non-superhero version of this film about a Mexican family drama to find out what Jaime would actually have done had he been living in the real world.